If you're allocating time and resources to count, you should be able to get data that's actionable. And that is something that hasn't existed prior to UDI. So if we can enable our hospitals and our supply chain to be able to maximize the efforts of time as well as reduce the time to count, the amount of information that a hospital can gain from that is invaluable.
Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
On this episode of Power Supply, we speak with Ashlea Souffrou, president at ScanPro. We're going to be talking about UDI, inventory management, and really reducing waste related to expired products.
No, Justin, I'm really excited to see what Ashlea has to say today. I think there's an audience that needs to hear this. The manual versus the UDI scanning and the opportunity for what it presents. And just looking a little bit at her LinkedIn profile and what she offers, I think we're going to get great education today and really create some efficiencies and some lean opportunities across the system. So looking forward to it.
All right, we're going to be right back after a short break with Ashlea Souffrou, president at ScanPro.
I'm Hays Waldrop.
This is Garry Skinner.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
A production of 17 Studios. You're listening to Power Supply.
Joining us now is Ashlea Souffrou, president at ScanPro, and we're going to be talking about UDI. We're going to be talking about inventory, and we're going to let into some, I'd say, the hidden truths. Maybe I could even say the dirty secrets about inventory in the hospital. And so, Ashlea, so happy to have, I know you and I have been conversing for quite a while, and you're also one of our experts or subject matter experts on the expert series coming out of Power Supply. So I'm excited to introduce you to our listening audience as well today. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share UDI and talk about everyday use cases with the listeners. It'll be awesome.
So why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself? I know anybody who's following us on LinkedIn and sees the expert series does get your bio there. And so I'm just going to keep plugging that because it's really some great content as you are our UDI expert for that series. But tell us a little bit more about your background.
So I started in the medical device industry right out of college. So I have been working in hospitals, and I love to share this fact. I've been in hospitals in 42 states. So I share that just because I have seen the dirty secrets in all of these different places. After Stryker, I was working they acquired a company called Ascent, which was a reprocessing company, and I started selling for Ascent in the Western Michigan area. And I really found all of these opportunities on cost savings and sustainability and had this just look under the hood as far as all of this waste that was happening in healthcare. And I kept having my customers, my hospital saying, "Hey, Ash, what can you do with this? Or can we reprocess this? Or can we recycle this?" And so I ended up starting a distributorship that was focused on cost savings through sustainable solutions. So I went and I found all these different companies that provided a product like that, but didn't necessarily have a direct sales force. And through that, I got into the business of helping hospitals sell excess and unused supplies. And with that business, it was very, very manual. In order for us to resell a product, you have to have reference numbers, lot numbers, expiration dates. And then I got into the business of doing hospital closures. And it was right at the same time that UDI was coming out. And I thought, well, there's all these barcodes on the products. There has to be a way for me, from our business, to be able to inventory. There was nothing out there. And I was shocked by it. I was looking at what some of the major even inventory management systems were doing, and nobody was adopting UDI. And so I just started educating myself on UDI and started, ARM is a great resource, and they have, the Learning UDI committee or community, and there's all this research that was being done. And I was like, this is going to transform healthcare. And so I just got behind UDI, and, I've built a business around it, but I've also worked with hospitals every single day on helping them implement and utilize UDI to improve processes and reduce waste.
So just in case nobody out there knows what you're referencing when you say UDI, can you tell us what the acronym stands for and exactly what its purpose is?
Absolutely. Sorry, I skipped right over that. So it stands for the Unique Device Identifier. And the best way for me to compare this is the UPC code on your box of Cheerios. So the retail food industry has been using barcode standards for years, since I can remember, right? Well, medical device just started to adopt this, and it was because, and it paired with electronic medical records. So in healthcare, in order for us to track recalls, everything was manual. And so the FDA mandated that hospitals had to start adding all the implant information to the patient medical record. And as a result, it uncovered, wow, there's all these manual processes. So UDI was advocated for 5 years before it was actually adopted. And now every single manufacturer is required to put this barcode on a medical device so that it can be scanned, whether it's right at the receiving dock all the way through point of use in the operating room.
And what kind of information does it give us? Or maybe I should say anybody working in the hospital, maybe it's even the manufacturers are using it to communicate information. What's available? I understand there's the barcode, but what's available in that, and what does it open us up to in terms of access to additional information?
Great question, because I think that's the dirty secret that you were referring to. People don't realize how much information is actually attached to the UDI barcode. So when a manufacturer has to submit for a 510K and get approved, they actually have to register for their UDI barcode, which the UDI is just that unique device identifier that's specific to that one product. They have to include reference numbers. They have to include device description, manufacturer. And then within the UDI, there's other components, right? So there's the serial number, which is going to be unique to that one product. There's going to be expiration dates. There's going to be lot numbers. It's really fantastic to see even now how some manufacturers, Ethicon being one of them, is doing an amazing job of updating the FDA's database to include packaging types. So the barcodes will, as we scan it, can parse out, is it a case? Is it an each? Is it a box? They're starting to include their 510K information so that a hospital, if they carry the 510K, and we all know that product recalls are a total nightmare, but at minimum, hospitals are aware based on a 510K number that's recalled. If they're scanning the UDI and pulling that information that's out there, it's through the Access Good ID, then they are able to search for any product that could have been in their system based on that lot number.
And so what year, what month, when did they actually create that standard? Is that something fairly new?
2013 is when the FDA gave guidance to the industry to say that these are going to be the new barcode standards for medical devices. In 2015 is when Class 3 devices were required to have the UDI barcode on them. And then by the end of this year, we'll see all medical devices, including capital equipment, will have UDI on them.
Well,
that's fantastic. That's great.
Ashlea, I'm going to take this in a whole nother world. I'm getting the meats and potatoes and nerd alert right here because I love talking about inventory. You have brought up the manual counts, small critical access hospitals, whether you're an ASC, whether you're a level 2. I've seen it all over the board, and I know a lot of these listeners have probably just got done with the annual physical inventory counts. Man, how many teams, how many sets of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, how many peoples, how many days, how many shutdowns? What are the advantages of this? You've talked about it a little bit, having the UDI and being able to use this. But is there Wi-Fi technology needed? Is it as simple as plugging in a scanner into a computer? Kind of go over that process a little bit to take the next steps to move it in that direction to be more of a lean system, please.
So what you're referring to happens across the country, right? Everybody does their inventory counts manually. And when they count, they're doing just that. They're saying this facility ID code has this quantity. That's it. They're not able to have any visibility into expiration dates. They're not looking at the product and saying, do we use this product? Should it be sitting here? Should we continue counting this product? There's absolutely nothing else that's happening with all of that time waste, is what I will continue to call it, because there's no visibility into any other detail when you're capturing that product information. By leveraging technology, and there's lots of different technologies out there. You could use a Zebra scanner depending on which, inventory system you're using. There's mobile apps that are out there. There's cloud-based systems. There's definitely technology that exists to allow the counts so that someone could scan the UDI and have visibility now into all that data that we just talked about a minute ago through that one barcode scan. So if you're allocating time and resources to count, you should be able to get data that's actionable. And that is something that hasn't existed prior to UDI. So if we can enable our hospitals and our supply chain to be able to maximize the efforts of time as well as reduce the time to count, the amount of information that a hospital can gain from that is invaluable. You get clean master inventory lists. You're cleaning up your reference numbers. You're cleaning up, descriptions. You have visibility into expiration dates and lot numbers. Those two things are something we don't talk about enough in supply chain because we've never had visibility into it unless we were manually writing it down. With UDI, one scan, regardless of how you're scanning it, it parses that data. You're going to have visibility now into lot numbers and expiration dates. And it doesn't matter who you're talking to in the hospital. Somebody finds benefit from all of those different things. CFO cares about the expiration dates. CFO wants to know, how much money are we losing? As far as supply chain, are we actually using this product? Can we recover those dollars before we throw them away? My biggest thing is if you have visibility into it, you can transfer those items. Let's make sure we're using the product, not just letting it sit there and act as a count on a shelf and put that product to use. That's why it was manufactured.
On the recall side of things, I think it would be huge. And as a former implant guy, just being able to keep track of lots and model numbers would be huge.
Right now, the ARM Learning UDI Committee, and I always reference them because they're the ones that advocated with FDA to get UDI in place. So they're a great resource. Right now, we're working with the FDA to try to change, and I say we because I'm actually part of this committee. We're trying to advocate to have manufacturers use UDI when they go to submit a recall. Currently, there's no consistency with recalls, right? They put in a 510K and then they do a lot range or a listed lot. There's just no consistency. But if we have UDI, then all of these hospitals that are currently leveraging it, they could do one quick search to see, well, where was that UDI used, especially because it's already in the electronic medical record. It would save so much time for hospitals and resources because it's a large expense for hospitals right now.
So you just talked about that manual inventory process, but there are some electronic solutions out there. And I think sometimes it can be pretty expensive. What's kind of the current state for getting inventory in a non-manual way?
I would say 1% of hospitals are doing it in a non-manual way.
Wow. 1%.
It is still paper and pen across the entire country. I talked to some of the major health systems. There's a couple of companies out there today that you can use iPads and you can get inventory and you can decrement and increase your counts, and it gives you an overview. But I would say a very small percentage of hospitals are using it today.
Wow. And I would concur with you too. I've been with major organizations where we've seen it from a scanner, Wi-Fi, decrement, real time on periodic and perpetual inventories, where I've seen it go completely backwards 30 years, where it is a tablet and it's seriously a clipboard and two people counting together, signing off. And that's the whole thing about it too. And Ashlea, if you could talk about this a little bit too, like we have to shut down to count. You almost have to stop and start. I mean, healthcare never quits. We're still taking care of the patient, right? So you really can't shut down patient care. You're utilizing supplies all day long. This is more real time, right? If we're using this UDI, it's more real time, real focus.
If hospitals adopt UDI to do inventory as part of their daily practices, there really isn't a need to necessarily go through and do an annual inventory count. What we encourage our hospitals, specifically in our clinical areas, to leverage UDI is to replace the manual process where there's one person in every hospital. I don't care which hospital it is. There is a person that exists that eye tracks for expiration dates. They're required to, by law, by JCAHO, to make sure that there are not expired products on their shelf. So if they're leveraging UDI to do an inventory, maybe they do it quarterly and they replace that person's time, especially because we know people's time is so important right now, to enable that person to do something else besides going through a supply core and looking for expiration dates and putting a sticky note or a sticker on it to identify if it's expired. If they could scan that inventory one day, they could replace that eye tracking process and they could eliminate it essentially. And they would just have to do a 1 day inventory, maybe 4 times a year.
Totally makes sense. Could you utilize this with consignment as well in a medical device implant world versus a bill only that you own versus a bill and replace on consignment? It would totally make sense for consignment, wouldn't it?
Actually, what's interesting about that is we see currently with like an Allergan or Boston Scientific, their reps are leveraging UDI to manage their consignment inventory because the companies have their UDI built into their sales reps tools. So they can go in and they can scan their inventory. It's already happening today. What's not happening is the hospitals leveraging UDI to manage their own consignment inventory.
Hey, real quick, I just found something on the World Wide Web, and it says that 78%, and sorry, this is a little bit older, but 78%.
Hold on. Do we save that? Do we have that recorded?
Was that on the line?
I used to say this to be honoring.
Hold on. I just found something extremely technical on Facebook.
My neighbor's sister just posted something.
Hey.
I think that this is true.
Oh, it's from a credible source.
We're
FDA.
not wearing masks.
A recent survey of 4 people, including Hays Waldrop, found that 78% of hospitals count manually in 17.
That's a true statement. We reference that a lot.
I mean, I saw that on my MySpace page. That's true.
MySpace. In your web crawler? Was it in your web crawler?
Woo.
Anyways.
What?
My pager just went off. I just went into the payphone and I just called.
Hey, on my bag. I got my bag phone out. Hang on a minute.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
$10 a second.
Dude, totally. Oh, my God. I'm the oldest one here. My gosh. I'm probably.
Okay, I'm going to get us back on track before we lose the.
You still have an AOL address, correct, Gary?
It's not important right now, man. But yes.
AIM. Daisy530 was my AIM address.
Oh, wow. Now we're really
That's how my
getting some good
husband and
information
I
now.
started dating. 100%.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Wow. Sweet.
Through the chat and AOL?
He asked me to prom on, and I've been dating my husband since high school. We've been together for 20 years this year, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah. And, he asked me to prom over AOL Instant Messenger. So
Dude, that is awesome.
You know what? You don't get this information any other place. This is amazing
That's good
information.
stuff right here.
I need to update my MySpace page on that
MySpace.
now. Tell everybody to come out and watch. Listen.
sorry, Justin.
Justin.
They like to make my job hard. Then they all
Come on,
look at me
Justin.
like,
Get this back on track. Come on, buddy.
Okay, so we just talked about the limited amount of technology being utilized to really get a handle on this inventory. And as you mentioned, best case might be quarterly and taking a lot of resources. And while some do have a technology, it's still a pretty big undertaking. There's some consequences to not having a real-time understanding of this inventory that generates a lot of waste in the industry. Am I right about that?
Absolutely.
What are some of those consequences?
The amount of inventory that goes to waste in a hospital is still unknown. By having visibility into what's going to expire on your shelves, hospitals are able to make proactive decisions about their inventory. So leveraging UDI and having visibility into expiration dates, you know if you have inventory that's sitting there that's going to expire in 12 months. And my question back to anybody is, well, if it's sitting there, most products have 2 years of product expiration. That means you haven't used it in a year. So now let's talk about transferring that product to another sister facility. Let's sell that product and recover dollars. The opportunity to sell inventory and recover dollars is an untapped market that only a handful of hospitals really take advantage of. Instead, they just say, well, the product is expired, we didn't use it, and it goes into a medical mission bin, and it just gets just completely thrown away. So when we talk about the risks or the cost to the hospital, they're losing money by not having visibility into expiration dates so that they can make proactive decisions.
You know, you talked a lot about the time savings that a system could have or hospital could have. With that being said, let's just say you showed up tomorrow, your technology or something very similar. How long does it take them to get started?
With UDI, as long as you're using a system that has UDI backed into it, where they're leveraging the data from the Access Good ID, anybody should be able to walk into a health system and start scanning same day, because the inventory the barcode's on there. So if they go in and they just start scanning, if you're using our technology or another technology, our team can do 6,000 SKUs in 8 hours with 2 people. That's how fast. And that you could challenge that against what's happening in retail, right? Those numbers apply just like you would with a UPC code.
Gotcha. That's great.
So what are some things you can do as you're identifying those expired supplies so that they don't go to waste? Like, are there some proactive things that hospitals can do for revenue recovery? Or I know one thing you said was kind of that responsibility to not let them expire and maybe send them over to a sister facility. But are there other options as well for that inventory?
Absolutely. There are companies throughout the country that help redistribute these products. It's something I'm crazy passionate about, and it's actually why I got into this 15 years ago. Our small community hospitals are paying significantly more than our large health systems. So the large health systems, if they go through a massive product conversion and they have all of this inventory that's left over, the smaller community hospitals can take advantage and purchase those products through another company to reduce the risk of liability and have this massive amount of cost savings.
You rolled right into my next question, Ashlea. What has been the response from the CFOs and the controllers on what this has established? I mean, the dollars are there. They're real.
What's exciting for the CFOs is that they have visibility into a question that they've always been asking their supply chain, which is, how much inventory are we expiring? And the answer is, we have no idea. And it's not lack of skill set at all. It's because nobody is going to take an expired product and the people that are doing it, it's their job, right? Is to manage these inventories, but they're writing it down on pen and paper. And then somebody has to take the pen and paper and they have to load it into an Excel sheet and they have to manage that Excel sheet. And that's only if they're doing it. So by leveraging UDI, CFOs now have visibility into clean data, into analytics, into how much inventory is expiring. How much are we donating, right? As we talk about donations, you can't actually monetize donations. It's always a guess.
Right. And then I think about how it feeds into the item master. Not to get too deep in the weeds, but look at the item master and the markups and where it bills into insurances. I mean, that is just a direct, it runs that gamut. Is that right? Am I tracking with you?
100%. So that's where we're seeing there was a disconnect when UDI rolled out, because that was where so many people focused is we can fix this part of the problem. But the step that has been missed is that we have to clean up the item master. So we have to leverage UDI right when products are moved from an asset location, which is generally a warehouse, into the actual room. And by leveraging UDI technologies that can scan that barcode, you're able to see what's in a room in real time within an hour just by scanning UDI.
Ashlea, this is phenomenal. I just can't even believe, I guess I can, the amount of opportunity for technology to come in and help us, and especially in supply chain with all of the changes that have gone on over the last 2 years, like waste and efficiency, revenue recovery. These are all really important topics, and definitely leveraging technology, because guess what else we're running out of? It's people and staff. And so we're going to need help to do these jobs in a much more quick and efficient manner and make sure we're not losing dollars out the back door of the hospitals, almost literally, when you talk about the expired products. So Ashlea, a really great job in this interview today. And before we wrap, is there anything you want to add?
I would just encourage the listeners to dive into their current supply chain practices and see how UDI could fix one of their problems. I think that UDI can be daunting, and we've talked about it because it can solve so many problems. But if you look at one task, whether it's your master inventory, whether it's consignment, whether it's overstock, picking one and saying, how can we leverage UDI and technology to fix or solve or give visibility is a great first step into implementing UDI into your health system.
All right, Ashlea. Well, you've done a phenomenal job with the expert series, and I really enjoy that. I want to encourage everybody who's listening who is subscribing to the podcast, but maybe not following Power Supply on LinkedIn, to check out your monthly post. It'll be running for an entire year, and it's all about UDI and the capabilities that UDI, or the enhancements even, I should say, that UDI is bringing to the industry. They're great conversation starters, but I also want to encourage everybody to reach out to you directly on LinkedIn to continue the conversation, because it's not all there in one post. This is definitely a conversation that needs to be had and continues to need to be had all over social media. So thank you again. You did a phenomenal job today.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
That was Ashlea Souffrou, president at Scan Pro, and we talked all things UDI, but specifically Hays, the implications around inventory management, which is just such an incredibly laborious manual effort for so many hospitals today. And at the same time, there's so much information that technology can help us gather and organize and use to be able to run our hospitals more effectively, especially when it comes to inventory. So much opportunity in this area. I'm super psyched to see what's going to be coming out over the next 5 to 10 years to help us do a better job with this, because it just seems like we're so stuck in the past.
I would totally agree, but I think it's not going to be 10 years. I think, like even the technology that she talked about was virtually less than 5% of the hospitals in the U.S. are using anything like this. And so the advantages that clinical, financial, operational that are there, she's absolutely spot on and in a good space. But yeah, great interview. I learned a lot.
Yeah, she's a dynamic individual, and I've appreciated her contributions on the Power Supply Expert Series as well. So I know I plugged that a ton, but I'm going to do it one last time before we wrap. Make sure you're following Power Supply Media on LinkedIn, and that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can support Power Supply by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts. You can also find us on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or just search for Power Supply Media Podcast on your favorite podcast application. You can also access bonus content for certain episodes, but you got to download the smartphone app for iPhone and Android. And while you're there downloading it from your app marketplace, we'd certainly appreciate a rating and a review, because your feedback is important to the show. On behalf of Garry, Hays, and myself, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Power Supply.